It's sad to say, but I've gotten used to disappointment when it comes to spiritual successors to iconic games made by their original creators. That means I'm disappointed, but not surprised to tell you that Balan Wonderworld, the latest 3D platformer from Sonic the Hedgehog co-creators Yuji Naka and Naoto Ohshima, is a fundamentally flawed shadow of its predecessors. Its character designs, cutscenes, and music are certainly charming, but charm alone isn't enough to make this half-baked platformer any less boring to actually play. This is usually the part where I'd break down Balan Wonderworld's story for you, but there's not much to tell about the unexplained nonsense it calls a plot. You play as a child who's quickly abducted by a magical top hat man and dropped into a dreamland full of weird birds. That's all the setup you get before it starts parading you through 12 visually varied worlds, each structured around some troubled person introduced through brief but genuinely energetic and entertaining cutscenes. That could be a boy trying to build a flying machine, or a girl whose dolphin friend seemingly maimed her and left her to die. The problem is that their introductory cutscenes are held until the very end of each world, right before a boss, with another immediately resolving their issue right after. Aw, see, he feels bad about hurting her. That pacing makes the levels you play before them disjointed and devoid of context, and turns Balan Wonderworld into little more than a jumble of endearing but incoherent ideas. The festering rot at the heart of Balan Wonderworld, though, is the inexplicable decision to make it a one-button game. Apart from using the shoulder buttons to swap between 3 ability-altering costumes, every button does the same thing. Even in the dang menus where you literally can't even press B or circle to go back. Out of costume, that button is an underwhelming jump, but each of the more than 80 available outfits alter that function. For example, a jack-o'-lantern costume will make you punch instead, while a sheep suit lets you hover, and the visual variety and design of them is at least decently amusing. But Balan Wonderworld doesn't provide a single good reason for why it restricts itself to just one button, and it prevents many costumes from even being able to jump, the most basic of platforming actions. Those built around jumping work alright, but others range from perplexing to downright awful as a result. Things like an exploding clown or a flower that stretches upward a bit are borderline useless. Others might be able to jump, but potentially at the cost of their ability only activating when standing still. Or worse, there are a few costumes like the truly baffling Box Fox, which will turn you into a cube, and I quote, when it feels like it. Like, what? Just give me 2 buttons instead. Because taking damage means your costume is removed too, you can often lose the one ability you need to progress or reach a statue, Balan Wonderworld's equivalent of Mario's stars. That leaves you with no option but to tediously backtrack and grab another copy of that outfit, which are locked behind purple gems whose keys are always just a couple steps away. That gives unlocking them all the thrill of playing hide and seek with a 4-year-old. Balan Wonderworld frequently seems to ignore the fundamentals of the platforming genre, largely foregoing the usual structure of introducing a mechanic and then building more interesting and challenging sections out of it as you progress. Instead, costumes are generally used for their simplest function a few times, and then tossed aside shortly after. They'll occasionally be needed in other worlds to access optional bits that are rarely worth the effort, but nearly every obstacle is just a matter of having the right costume ability or not. Perhaps most clearly illustrated by this ladder guy, who can make ladders on a handful of ladder spots. Exciting, right? This constant churn of only the most basic ideas left me bored and unengaged for all of the roughly 9 hours it took me to reach the credits. The one place this trend is ever so slightly bucked is in its bosses, which flaunt Balan Wonderworld's knack for neat character designs. Bosses followed the cookie-cutter 3-hit formula to beat, but there are actually 3 different ways to deal damage, be it stomping on their toe or dropping a pillar on their head. Each one you figure out and use earns you a statue, which makes them more like an action puzzle. Dodging their attacks and hitting back is still incredibly basic and sometimes annoyingly unintuitive, but these bosses are at least more creative than the levels themselves. Between those levels, you return to a pointless garden hub full of pointless birds. For anyone hoping this green-hilled zone is comparable to the Sonic Adventure series' adorable Chow Garden, it's not even close. There's very little interaction with these bird blobs beyond feeding them crystals to make them spin a wheel that ticks up a counter. The feeding process is tedious too, since throwing out too many at once will cause others to despawn, and the structures that are built as a result seem entirely superfluous. With zero motivation to do this busy work, I eventually stopped caring about collecting crystals during levels. And when the main collectible of your 3D platformer becomes more trouble than it's worth, that's a pretty catastrophic breaking point. Balan Wonderworld isn't always an awful platformer, but it is a consistently boring one. It's full of charming character designs, fun music, and the occasional hint of a clever idea, but its insistence on being a one-button game with a needless number of underwhelming abilities rots it to the core. Its level design never really evolves beyond the most rudimentary obstacles, but it's the fundamentally flawed choices behind that mediocrity that take Balan Wonderworld from bland to outright bad. Be sure to head over to IGN.com to read my full written review, or watch our reviews of Sackboy: A Big Adventure or Crash Bandicoot 4 for some far better 3D platformers. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.